I was not the daughter my father wanted. They said Lady Arabella Worthington was too soft, too large, too much of a burden for a name that weighed so heavy in English society. I heard the whispers for years, never married, always reading, hands to idle, eyes to alive. My father, Lord Worthington, made a show of loving me for the world to see, but behind closed doors his eyes could slice flesh. It was the end of summer when he decided I would be rid of him or he of me. He didn't look at me as our carriage rolled to a stop before the sun-bleached ramparts of Fort Benson. The outpost sat on the edge of Apache territory, a skeleton of splintered wood and battered pride, sweltering in the kind of heat that boiled the fat off your bones. Soldiers and locals gathered to gawk, as if the circus had arrived. My father stood tall, every inch the Lord, his mouth a hard line. "Step down," he ordered. I obeyed, awkward and flushed, my heavy skirts sticking to my thighs. Then I saw Chief McLeman the newspapers called a savage waiting with arms folded, the only one not staring at me like I was a grotesque painting. My father seized the moment, voice ringing out so all could hear. "In recompense for the Worthington land, I deliver my daughter to you. Let this settle all debts." My humiliation was public and absolute. My father did not touch me, did not even look my way as he turned and signed the papers that handed me over as chattel. A silence fell. The heat pressed against me, burning shame into my cheeks. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was full of sand. I wanted to beg, "Please, let me stay. I'll be better. I'll change." But the words froze. Chief Macca spoke not a word. He simply motioned, and I followed, heart pounding like a drum in my chest, every step further from everything I'd ever known. The walk from the fort was not dignified. My father's men didn't bother hiding their relief as I passed, and the soldiers' wives clucked with sympathy, but didn't move to help. I held my head high, or tried to, blinking back tears I'd sworn never to let him see. We crossed the parade ground. The dust stuck to my boots, sweat pooled under my arms. Chief Macca's people stood waiting with their ponies. No one jeered, but I saw wariness in every set of eyes. At the very edge of the settlement, I paused to look back. My father watched, impassive, arms folded across his chest, as if daring me to make a scene. I didn't. Instead, I turned my face away from the only world I'd known. With every step I took away from that fort, I felt the weight of my father's disappointment and the eyes of a dozen strangers. My body shook with humiliation and terror, but I kept moving, numb but breathing, following Chief Macca into the unknown. The desert is not merciful, not to the proud or the broken. By the second day, I was both .maka and I rode west. The Sana, white coin overhead, every mile stripping away the layers I'd used to shield myself from a world I never understood. I clung to my pony's back, thighs aching, mouth cracked and dry, sweat soaking my shift until I stopped caring how I looked. There were no mirrors in this wilderness, only the truth, reflected in how quickly I faltered. I expected cruelty. I expected Macca to sneer or mock my clumsiness, to ride ahead and leave me behind as punishment. Instead, he watched. When I sagged in the saddle, he offered water with a single nod. When I stumbled, he waited, never touching, but never letting me fall too far behind. The nights were worse. The silence pressed in, heavy with all I'd lost. Macca built the fire with practiced hands and divided the food between us. He ate first, then handed me the rest, as if daring me to refuse his charity. I did not. My pride was a brittle, useless thing out here. I was too tired to pretend I was above him or anyone. On the third morning, my knees buckled as I tried to remount. Macca held out his hand, palm up, steady as a rock. I hesitated, hearing my father's voice. "Don't trust them. Don't touch them. They are not like us. But I took it. His grip was warm, strong, respectful. He helped me up, then released me as if to say, "You can still stand on your own." He spoke little, but when he did, it was with a gentleness that rattled everything I thought I knew about men like him. He pointed out water hidden in the shadows of rocks. Found shade when I looked ready to faint, and set our pace by the shortest. Remember me. I began to notice how he moved, how his people watched him with quiet trust, how none of them snickered at my struggles. I watched, too, curious despite myself. I expected hunger. Instead, I tasted corn cakes and wild honey. I expected harsh words. Instead, I heard the soft murmur of a song, sung in a language I didn't know, as Macca cleaned a scrape on my hand with a patience that felt almost paternal. One afternoon, I overheard him speak to a girl from his band, his words quiet, but careful. She glanced at me, smiled shyly, then pressed a handful of berries into my palm before running off. I nearly wept at the kindness. Why isn't he cruel? The question kept me awake at night, curled beneath a blanket of stars, listening to Macca's steady breathing. Everything I'd been told the stories, the warnings, none of it matched the man who handed me water without judgment or the people who shared what little they had. The dessert whittled me down to the bone, but it carved away the lies, too. I found myself wanting to learn, to understand. I began to watch Macca, not as my captor, but as someone with wisdom in his silence. My walls, so carefully built, started to crack not from violence, but from an absence of it. By the time we reached the first hills beyond the desert, I knew one thing for certain. I would not survive if I clung to my father's truths. I had to find my own. Arriving in Macca's village felt like stepping onto a stage in the wrong costume every I turned my way, curiosity and caution mingling in the faces of children, elders, and mothers holding babies tight. I braced for suspicion, even hatred, but no one spat or jeered. Their stares were wordless questions I couldn't answer. The village wasn't what I expected. Homes of bent willow and sun-baked mud ringed a shallow stream, gardens blooming despite the heat. Horses grazed quietly, and women worked at weaving or cooking, laughter floating through the air. Far and yet inviting, I stood at the edge, clutching my bag, feeling heavier and more helpless than ever. Macca spoke to a white-haired woman with skin the color of river stone. She greeted him with a touch to his cheek, then turned to me. "Nellie," he said, gesturing. "You will stay with her." Nellie's eyes soft, but sharp measured me in a heartbeat. She beckoned with a gentle hand, her English clipped but warm. I followed, my body sore and my pride battered, heart thumping as if I were walking into judgment. Nellie's home was small, but filled with color, and life blankets dyed every shade of sunset. Pots bubbling on the fire, herbs drying from the rafters. She handed me water, then bread, and gestured for me to sit. I obeyed, stiff, ashamed, aware of my sweat and clumsy boots dirtying her neat floor. Daily life was relentless. Nellie rose before dawn, coaxing me to do the same. She expected me to help gathering water, grinding corn, mending torn seams. My hands, spoiled and soft, fumbled with every task. I spilled the water bucket my first morning, soaking my skirt and splattering the packed earth. Laughter rippled from two girls at the door, and my face burned. I was slow, weaker than the children. My breath came short. My arms ached from kneading bread, and even the simplest chores left me gasping. I broke a clay pot while trying to carry it, shards scattering at my feet. Hot tears blurred my vision, the sting of failure mixing with the memory of my father's dismissive snort. That night, as I sat staring at my useless hands, Macca crouched beside the fire. He watched me quietly, then spoke, Start with what you can carry, he said. His words weren't unkind. Don't measure yourself by others. Just today, it struck something deep. I'd spent my life measuring up to standards that never fit me, my mother's faded beauty, my father's pride, the world's idea of what a woman should be. Here, no one expected me to be anything except useful, and I wasn't even that not yet dot, so I tried again. The next day, I carried half-full buckets. I listened to Nellie's patient instructions. I sat with the children, copying how they tied bundles and shelled beans. The women watched me, their skepticism softening as I learned to laugh at my mistakes. Little by little, my shame eased. Nellie praised my bread, and the two girls now bold enough to introduce themselves as Tala, and Suni offered to show me how to weave. I was still an outsider, still a stranger. But I was no longer ignored or pitied. Every small victory mattered. A whole pot of water hauled without spilling, a row of corn husked faster than Suni, a quiet smile from Nellie at dusk stop by the end of the week. I realized something had shifted. For the first time in my life, my worth wasn't measured in beauty or marriage prospects or obedience, but in what I was willing to learn in the days that followed. I learned to carry what I could then more than I ever thought possible. Life in the village was both challenge and teacher. The sun was harsh, but laughter grew easier. My body, at first so slow and heavy, toughened with work. My arms stopped aching. My breath came easier. I learned to keep time with the others, when to kneel for the sweet roots of wild onions, how to follow Suni to the stream for reeds, how to listen to Nellie's stories about the old world. Her wrinkled fingers tracing the air, every small skill, felt like a gift. My fingers grew nimble at braiding. My shoulders grew used to the burden of water. Even my English, so stiff and proper, softened as I picked up words in Apache from the children who giggled as they taught me. There was pride in every accomplish. There was pride in every accomplishment, but doubt still clung like a burr. At night, I wondered if my efforts would ever be enough. When I looked in the polished tin above Nellie's fire, I saw the same round face, the same scars left by years. Of UNKINDNESS.MAKA visited often, checking on my progress. He was patient, showing me how to spot good herbs from bad, how to wrap a burn or coax life from dry soil. Sometimes he spoke of his people's history, but mostly he listened. His calm presence a balm against my constant self-doubt. He never mocked my clumsiness. When I stumbled, he helped me up. When I succeeded, he nodded approval. Never more, never less. It was not pity. I would have known the taste of that. It was respect, rare and precious, offered quietly as sunlight. The other women warmed slowly as they watched me struggle and return each day for more. Tala, bold and quick with her laughter, began teaching me to weave baskets. Suni showed me where the wild grapes grew. Nellie called me granddaughter for the first time, and it nearly ended me. I started to find moments of belonging, a shared joke, a hand on my shoulder, a smile at dusk as we ate together. For the first time, I was not a burden to be hidden, not a failed promise. The children fought to sit by me at the evening fire, asking questions about England, about dresses and snow. My old world felt distant, less real, as my new life took root. Still, I struggled with doubt. The ghosts of my father's words, the sharp sting of every rejection, lingered in the quiet before sleep. I had always been told I was too much, too large, too loud, too odd. Here, there was only the question, what can you give? I leaned into my work, letting effort replace worry. I watched Macca's face for approval more than I'd admit. My pride in learning outgrew my shame at failing. I was not perfect. I was changing piece by piece, from the inside out. When Macca called me to join him on a gathering trip, the honor stunned me. He handed me a basket, showing me what to pick and what to leave, never rushing, never doubting that I could learn. I tried, fumbling at first, but soon my hands worked with his, side by side. We returned as equals, carrying food for the village. Guz. I washed my hands that night. I cut my reflection and did not flinch. I saw a woman earning her place day by day, not by birthright or beauty, but by the strength of her will and the kindness she had found in unexpected places. The air was thick with the promise of harvest when Macca asked me to walk with him beneath the silver gaze of the full moon. The whole village was alive at night fires glimmering, voices raised in old songs, but he led me away from the laughter and into the quiet hills beyond. I followed, heart racing, not knowing what to expect. We climbed until the village lights were small as lantern bugs below. Macca stopped at a rocky overlook and sat, motioning for me to do the same. The land unfurled before us, wild and eternal, and I felt suddenly small but not unworthy. Macca carried a wooden flute, worn smooth by years of use. He raised it to his lips and played a melody so haunting it made the hair rise on my arms. The song curled round me like smoke, speaking of longing, loss, and hope without a single word. When he finished, silence pressed in. I looked at him, my throat tight with all the questions I'd never dared ask. Why me? Why kindness when I was given as punishment, as burden? He turned, meeting my gaze, his voice low. My mother was called many names before she found her place. People saw her sighs and her scars, not her courage. She became beloved here. You remind me of her. His words ended me. No one had ever spoken to me of beauty or value. Not like this, not without a price. Not without a backhanded compliment lurking behind their eyes. I was sent here in shame. I whispered. I thought you'd resent me for it. Macca shook his head. Shame belongs to those who give it, not those forced to carry it. A lump formed in my throat. He saw the parts of me I'd tried to hide, the way I hunched my shoulders, the scars on my hands, the old wounds still raw beneath my skin. He named them, not as curses, but as proof that I had lived and survived. In the moonlight, he reached for my hand, not with possession, but with an invitation. I took it, my palm trembling, overwhelmed by the weight of what it meant. He smiled just a flicker and told me I was welcome. Not because I was useful, not because I was owed, but simply because I was enough. I cried, silently, grateful and afraid. Years of scorn melted from my bones, replaced by something new, the fierce, fragile hope that maybe I could love and be loved in this wild, generous place. That night, as we walked back to the village together, I carried his melody in my chest. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe the future could be bright. For the first time, I truly saw myself not as a punishment, but as a person worthy of joy. The peace didn't last. One evening, as the scent of roasting corn drifted through the village, a cloud of dust rose on the horizon. Riders, white men in uniforms, red-faced and stiff in the saddle. Word spread quickly. Lord Worthington, my father, was coming with soldiers to rescue his lost daughter. The memory of his voice sharp, cold, inescapable echoed in my skull. I shivered, panic twisting with anger. The old life was reaching for me. I stood behind Macca as he greeted the soldiers at the edge of the village, every villager watching, silent and wary. My father dismounted with a flourish, the swagger of a man certain of his rightness. He called me by my old name loud enough for the hills to hear. Arabella, come here, now. I've come to take you home. You've had your punishment enough. Foolishness. He made it sound like mercy, as if I should be grateful. I felt the eyes of the Apache on me, some afraid, some furious, all waiting. Macca spoke calmly. She is not a prisoner. She chooses where she stays. My father scoffed. You've bewitched her. She's my daughter, and I demand her return. His men fingered their rifles, ready for violence at the first excuse. Fear prickled my skin, but underneath it, something steadied. Macca stepped back, trusting me to speak. My heart thundered, but I would not bow. No, I said, I won't go with you. A hush fell. My father's face twisted with disbelief, then rage. You would choose these savages? You would shame your family, your country by siding with them? I shook, but I stood my ground. You shamed me first. You sold me for land. You never saw me, only my failings. Here, I am not a burden. Here, I am seen. His eyes flashed, then hardened. If you do not come, there will be consequences. Blood, if need be. The threat cracked the air. Brittle and real, the Apache warriors tensed, weapons in hand. I saw Suni, trembling behind Nellie, and for the first time, I was more afraid for them than for myself. I stepped forward, voice shaking but clear. I will not leave. I belong here. My father's men muttered, uncertain, glancing at their leader, then at Macca, who stood tall, silent but unyielding. I felt his faith in me, a solid presence at my back. My father stared at me a long moment. I saw, for the first time, that he had no power over me here, not really. He was outnumbered and, in this place, unwelcome. He spat at my feet, turned on his heel, and barked orders for his men to mount up. As they rode away, he did not look back. My legs nearly gave out. Macca caught my arm, steadying me. The villagers let out a collective breath, some crying, some cheering, all understanding the price of what I'd just done. In that moment, I felt the chains of my old life fall away for good. I was not what my father made me, nor what he left behind. I was something new, and I had chosen it myself. The aftermath hit harder than the confrontation itself. My father's threat hung in the air like thunder, too loud to ignore, too dangerous to dismiss. The Apache village braced itself, sentries posted at every approach. The fires banked low each night. I slept little, nerves raw, replaying every word I'd said. Had I doomed us all by choosing to stay? It happened 3 days later. The soldiers returned before sunrise, their faces shadowed, rifles glinting cold. They crept into the village like wolves. The first shots rang out sharp and sudden panic exploded, women screaming, children scattering for shelter. Maka was already moving, shouting orders, rallying the warriors. I saw him throw himself in front of Nellie as a bullet tore through the smoke, grazing his arm. Suni cried out, clutching her side, red blooming on her tunic. I didn't freeze. I ran to her, heart pounding, years of lessons in useless society manners vanishing. Blood welled beneath my hands as I pressed fabric to her wound. I barked for help. Tala, and another woman steadied Suni while I worked, recalling everything Nellie and Macca had taught me. Compress, breathe, keep her awake. The chaos swirled around us, shouts, gunfire, the guttural cries of wounded men. But in that moment, all I saw was Suni's pain and my hands working to ease it. The battle was short, brutal, and decisive. Macca and the warriors forced the soldiers to retreat, outnumbered and unfamiliar with this land. When the last rifle cracked and silence returned, the ground was stained, but the village stood strong. I helped carry Suni into Nellie's hut, my arms steady, my mind clear. As I tended the wounded Apache and enemy alike, something inside me settled. I had purpose. My fear faded, replaced by a calm certainty. I belonged here, not because I was needed, but because I had chosen to stay and serve. The villagers came to me in the days that followed, not just for healing, but for comfort, for words, for laughter I didn't know I could give. Even Macca, stoic and scarred, let his guard drop. He thanked me, not as a chief, but as a man grateful for the life of someone he loved. I grieved my father's hatred, yes, and the wounds his choices had carved into me. But I did not grieve the loss of my old life. I buried it with gratitude and finality, and let myself become who I was meant to be. Nellie gave me a new name, Nani, one who brings life. When the sun set over the village that night, I sat by the fire, Suni's head in my lap, Macca's hand resting quietly in mine. For the first time, there was peace. I was no longer an outcast, a punishment, or a burden. I was Nani Healer, loved, respected, and that was enough. Years passed. The seasons spinning gold from sorrow and weaving me deeper into the fabric of village life. The world beyond the hills changed, forts emptied, the land settled and swallowed by new hands. But here, in this place that had once been my exile, I became Nalani, wife, mother, healer, and sometimes legend. Maka and I grew together, roots entwined beneath every hardship and joy. We built our own home, raised children who laughed into languages, and gathered people at our hearth who once would have scorned a woman like me. I watched my body grow stronger, my hands skilled and sure. My old scars faded, though I kept the memory of them, sharp enough to remind me of who I'd once been. One summer, a stranger arrived, an Easterner, shoes to clean, eyes too hungry for stories. He introduced himself as a reporter, eager to learn the truth behind the legend of Nalani. I laughed, surprised that anyone beyond the canyon still cared. He asked his questions carefully, notebook poised, expecting tales of captivity, escape, revenge. Instead, I told him how I was given away, not as a bride, but as punishment, how I thought I would die of shame or grief, and how the people I was taught to fear became my family. I spoke of learning to heal, to teach, to love. A man who saw my worth before I did. He frowned, unsatisfied. Why would you stay after all that was done to you? I considered. The answer, at last, was easy, because what began as punishment was really deliverance. I was never truly lost. I was waiting to be found. He wrote his story. Of course, some believed it. Most preferred the old legends, a wild white woman, tamed by savages, a tale of rescue or ruination. But those who visited, who shared our table, or worked beside us in the fields, saw the truth. Here, a woman could shed her shame and become whole. Sometimes, when the fire burned low and Macca played his flute beneath the stars, I'd remember the girl. I once was the one who walked behind her father's horse. Trembling with fear and disgrace, I mourned her, forgave her, and let her rest. My children knew both names, Arabella and Nalani. I taught them not to fear the word outcast, but to see it as a beginning. I told them we build our own worth, stitch by stitch, deed by deed, and that love, when it finally comes, is not the end, but the proof that we survived. And so my story became legend, not of captivity or revenge, but of belonging, of finding home in the unlikeliest of places. I lived, I healed, I loved. That was all, and it was everything.